Friends, it's Marie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to start creating with this new stamp set by Brutus Monroe. This is their Steampunk stamp set. I also have this Gears stencil and this brick wall stamp from Brutus Monroe and Unity. I'm going to go ahead and create a card today, or it could be a art journal page. It's kind of more of that style. It's just whatever you like to do. This is a different style for me. I don't usually do this kind of style on cards, so that's why I kind of called it art journal, but I also don't art journal, so it's kind of an in-between sort of project for me, but it was really fun to do. Lots of ink blending, as you're gonna see, and coloring, so it did take a little bit of time, but I am absolutely in love with how this card turned out. I hope you are too. So what I'm doing is I'm loading this stamp into my Misty. I'm also adding my Brutus Monroe Detail Raven Black ink. Now this ink is permanent with any kind of mediums as long as it's dry, so I did stamp it out 3 times, and because I stamped it 3 times, I wanted to make sure it was completely dry before I put anything over it, so I did hit it with my heat tool. Now I stamped my girl out onto my cardstock first. I'm using some smooth white cardstock, and now I'm going to stamp her on some Brutus Monroe masking paper because I want to mask her off and then add a really cool background. So I'm going to stamp her onto this masking paper. I'm only going to stamp it once. I'm not worried about the image itself. This just needs to give me an outline to cut around so that I can then apply the mask over my image, and that will protect that area, that image, from getting any ink or anything on it while I'm creating my background. So I have my mask stamped, cut out, and I'm going to add it to my paper. Now one thing I really like about this Brutus Monroe masking paper is that they have scored the back side. So you just turn it over and kind of look for those score lines. It's really super easy to kind of bend it where it's scored and just peel off that backing paper. It makes it so super easy, and I love that. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up with the outline of my bottom stamped image, the one that I'm going to use on my actual card. Just adhere it down, make sure all the edges are kind of pushed down well so it doesn't flip up while I'm doing any ink blending, and then I'm good to go to create my background. So when you're masking, you do mask off your image, and that's what's going to be in front, so you want to kind of think of that as your front image and then create from the back, and it's protecting my stamped image from getting any of that ink or any of the other mediums on top of it, so that when I'm done with my background I can peel it away, and then I'll still have my clean, crisp image that I can color when my background is finished. So I'm starting my ink blending, and I'm doing a lot of ink blending on this background, lots of ink, and I'm starting with my brightest color, which is Twisted Citron. I just wanted to make a diagonal line going from the bottom to the top of this green color. I just thought that was really nice. I thought it would look like some really cool lighting coming from behind this girl. And then I'm going to go ahead and ink up some of the edges also with squeezed lemonade. After I did that, I'm coming in with some antique linen. Now this is a light color as well. It's got a little bit more of a brown tone for it, which will help me transition into my browns. I'm going to use a lot of browns on this background. I want that green to look like kind of a line of light, and then everything else is going to darken with my browns. Now I did speed this up a lot because ink blending does take time, but once you start getting ink on there and once it starts getting saturated, your paper starts getting saturated, you're actually going to find it going to be easier to start to keep ink blending. So at first it's going to seem like you're not really doing much, but keep at it, keep adding those layers, and as you build the layers, the ink's going to move and blend actually a lot better. So I'm using this Gears stencil. I believe this is from the Crafters Workshop, TCW, and I could be wrong, but I believe that's what it is. I bought this at Hobby Lobby a long time ago. So anyway, I didn't bother using any kind of pixie spray or anything to tape it down. I'm just holding it in place because I'm only using partial parts of this stencil. I think this is a really cool stencil. You can turn it on any side and just add color and add some of that design on your background. So I went ahead and I went over that with some gathered twigs distress ink, and now I'm taking that same gathered twigs color and going over what I just stenciled. So it's going to kind of start to blend all these colors, and you're still going to see those gears, but they're just going to be faded back a little bit. I'm increasingly going with darker and darker browns. I'm just kind of I'm going from my light colors to my dark colors, and I'm just adding more contrast. Now, one thing I am learning in my creating, I am not an artist. I've never taken a class on coloring or ink blending or any kind of craft class anyway. I just kind of have learned to do it myself. But one thing I'm learning is that the more contrast you add to your coloring, the better almost it looks. I just wanted to make that green look really like light, like bright light. And the best way to make your lighter colors look bright is to add darker colors. More of that contrast is going to make more of that stand out. And that's one thing I'm just kind of learning in general with coloring or ink blending. A little bit of contrast is not a bad thing. A lot of my cards seem to be, clean and simple and bright colors, and I'm learning that contrast can really add a lot to your project. So there's a little tip for you. So I'm going to go ahead, now that I've got all of my ink blending done. I did put a little bit of ground espresso and black soot on my ink blending. I'm using ground espresso on this Unity background stamp. I just want to stamp a little bit on the edges. I really want the edges to stand out, and I want that green in the middle of my card to really look like some cool light coming from the background. So I'm going to stamp some bricks on the side, and I love how that turned out. I'm glad I used the ground espresso and not the black. I think the black would have been a little bit too dark, but I think this ground espresso brown really kind of blended in well. You can still see it, but it's not like the focal point of the card. Our girl is definitely supposed to be the focal point. So I'm just kind of making the background, I'll kind of blend together, even though there's so many different elements going on. And I just inked up the edges of this stamp, and then I put my card stock right onto it. I didn't bother putting it on a MISTI or a block or anything. A lot of times with those big background stamps, I just find it easier to put my cardstock on top of it instead of the other way around. So since this is a steampunk kind of card, it needed some kind of metallics, and since it's my cards all need some kind of sparkle, so the best combination of that is the liquid elements from Brutus Monroe. I just squirted a little bit out onto my mixed media mat, and I'm taking some of my aqua pigment brushes and just splattering it on. I've said it before, but I love these brushes for splatters. They just do a really great job for some reason. And I am using my Brutus Monroe mixed media mat behind. Now, my mixed media mat is old. It's very well loved. It's got a lot of scrapes and is a little grungy. I've actually cut it in half, guys, and I store it underneath this black mat you see here, and I just whip it out when I need to do some mixed media or, something messy, and it really works for me. So I have my background pretty much done. I'm going to do a little bit of stamping later, but I'm going to peel off my mask now because I just couldn't wait to see what it looks like. Now, this mask did get a little bit sticky. I had to kind of work to peel it off. I think it got really saturated with all of that ink, so it got a little bit soft and it got a little bit tearing in a few places, but it did not tear my cardstock at all. It actually did a really great job of masking off my image. I've got a really crisp, clean image here. I love how it worked. It did leave a little bit of sticky residue. I don't know if that has anything to do with the temperature in my room or anything. It wasn't a problem because I just rubbed it off with my fingers, or I took my little Tombow sand eraser and erased some of those stubborn spots, and it didn't cause a problem with my coloring at all. So I'm taking this hot air balloon image from the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp this out in some ground espresso. This is the same color I use for ink blending and for stamping my bricks. I just thought it needed to be in the background. I thought we needed another image in there, not something that's competing with the front image of the girl, but something a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to stamp it up here in the corner, just lining it up, stamping it, and I think it really turned out great. I'm also going to add, stamp this image next to the girl on the other side, just using some of those leaves kind of sticking out. It's going to kind of echo on both sides, and I just think it looks really cool. I don't know about you. I don't do a lot of this style, but it was really fun to put together. All of the inks and the liquid elements and the coloring. It was fun to do. It took a while, but it was fun to do. Definitely different from my clean and simple style. Not a whole lot of dimension or anything. This is a 1-layer card. So, since my background is now done, I'm going to color my girl. And I'm using my Style File alcohol markers. I didn't want to risk using colored pencils because I'm really bad at those. I didn't want to risk using watercolor because I used Distress ink on the background, and that's reactive with water. So I went with my alcohol ink markers. Now, I apologize that I cut out all the coloring, but this video was already getting long, and I didn't know if you guys wanted to sit through a half-an-hour video. But I just did some simple coloring on there. Again, even with my alcohol ink coloring, adding a little bit of contrast, some darker and some lighter colors works great. So now I'm going to stamp out a sentiment. This is actually from another Brutus Monroe set, and it's a little quote by J.R. Rowling's. Is that her name? You'll see. I thought it was great. I thought it fit well with the card and the theme and the feel of the card. And I'm going to emboss this with some of my very favorite Gilded embossing powder. Now, I did stamp it out twice because I'm going to go ahead and cut this into strips. And I thought it's easier to just stamp it out twice to be sure that I can get these strips cut and not cut into the other words. And I'm glad I did that because I cut into the author's name. So I went ahead and I just cut the other one that I had stamped already. So it saves a little bit of time if you go ahead and just stamp it and emboss it twice. Otherwise, I would have had to go through that process again. But I was fine because I stamped it twice. So I've cut them into strips. I'm trimming them down. I'm going to figure out where I want to put all of these wonderful words. And I love the Gilded. And I thought afterwards maybe I should have used the copper color of embossing powder, but I think the gold really goes well, and I have that gold liquid element, so it coordinates. But that's pretty much going to finish the card. I'm going to stick these down with a little bit of foam adhesive just to pop them up a little bit, and then my card is finished. So a lot of the work went into the background, but I think it was worth it. I really like that green with the contrast of the brown, and then the masking and the coloring. Like I said, very different style, but I enjoyed it. So let me know what you think about this. You could definitely do this kind of technique in an art journal if you like doing that. I could stick it on a card base and mail it to someone who loves steampunk. I always thought the style was really unique and interesting. It really intrigues me. So whenever Brutus Monroe came out with their steampunk inspiration box, I was excited because it was something different to try, and I really love how it turned out. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any tips for masking or ink blending or any kind of steampunk style things, let me know. Otherwise, don't forget to subscribe, like, hit the bell for notifications, comment, share, and do all the things. And I will catch you guys next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.